So we wanted to bring you something else a little different. Menasor. Originally, like everybody else, we had sort of dismissed Menasor as a highly competitive player.
The only person who wanted to play Menasor was my 7-year-old. And I built him a Menasor deck, and he loved Menasor from the day we opened Combiners.
Yeah. So the original Menasor deck that you built, did you just... I don't remember. Did you just throw that together from just random cards?
It was more of a basic build and just tried to focus on the things that Menasor already had built into him once you formed him. So, Bold, Tough, and Pierce. So there was kind of a little bit of everything there. Okay. But the focus at that point was more on the original forms of the cards, of the characters, before he transforms. Mm-hmm. So trying to run Power Swords, because Menasor is melee once he forms.
Yeah.
And with running Power Swords meant also, hey, let's run Body Armors so we can maximize his Tough. Mm-hmm. That was the original version of Menasor.
Yep. Yeah, so before we get too much more into this, we should talk about his pieces and parts. So we've got Dead End, Motormaster, Breakdown, Drag Strip, and Off-Road. So right off the bat, he's a little bit different because you don't get a whole lot of cars and trucks that are Decepticons. So Motormaster and Off-Road are both trucks. The other three, Dead End, Drag Strip, and Breakdown, are all cars. So we've got one specialist in Breakdown. 2 ranged characters in Drag Strip and Dead End, and then 2 melee characters in Motormaster and Off-Road. Again, with that first build, you've got Tough 1 over here in Dead End. But that's about it. But he's got some interesting stuff going on. So the next time we came into this deck was when we went out to Origins. Now you qualified on the first match that we were in.
Yeah, I qualified for the finals at Origins on the first day.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to have some fun at that point.
Yeah. I had a rough Origins. I didn't do really well at all. So by Friday, I really wanted to just play something fun. So we took another look at Menasor because I was going to play a game for fun with my nephew one day, and he got distracted and ran off. And I started to really look at the cards, the guy's abilities, and I don't know, we decided at 12 at night, the night before, that we were going to build Menasor decks to play at the morning event, the next morning. So Dead End has a nice ability. When you flip to his bot mode, you get to draw a card. Motormaster, he protects everybody from direct damage when he's in his alt mode, which is really nice. So nobody can Plasma Burst or Zap or One Shall Stand, One Shall Fall anybody on the board except for Motormaster at the beginning of the game. When you flip to Motormaster's alt mode, he can choose somebody else to defend for him. He basically orders one of the other members of his Stunticon team to jump out in front of the attack for him.
Well, let's be careful on how we say that, because it's not defending for him. He chooses one of the other Stunticons to defend.
Yeah. And then Breakdown, he's only got the one ability in alt mode. If you flip 2 blues when you're attacking, he gets +2 attack. Drag strip. He's got an ability which I almost never use. I don't even think in the first build did we try and use it. But when you attack and you flip an orange and a blue, you can draw 2 cards. His bot mode, though, he's got Pierce 1, and he's attacking for 4, which we really tried to capitalize on the second and third builds of this deck, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And then off-road. He's got an interesting ability when he's in alt mode. When an enemy car attacks, do 1 damage to it. So, really useful against those high-level competitive cars decks.
I know it made some for some interesting matches against those cars decks because they did not want to attack you in alt mode, eating 1 damage.
And take that 1 damage if they didn't have to. Yeah. And then finally, in his bot mode, you repair 1 damage to off-road when you flip there. And then when you change into Menasor, when you combine, you get to draw 2 cards, which is really nice. And then you may play an extra action on each of your turns once you're Menasor. So I think in all the builds, it's kind of an action-heavy deck to sort of capitalize on that extra action that you get to play every turn. The Enigma becomes a pep talk once you combine. So you get to draw 2 cards from the Enigma. So version 1, the Origins version, your version, we just modified the starter deck.
Don't underestimate the starter deck.
The original starter deck, the Optimus Prime, Ironhide, Red Alert, and who's the other guy? I don't even remember. Bumblebee, yeah. But that is a pretty solid starter deck. It's got a nice balance of pips, and the cards in it are pretty solidly balanced as far as armors and weapons and actions and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so like you said, it was midnight when we decided to do this build.
And we were really sleepy, so we wanted to get done as quickly as possible so that we could sleep.
I decided for my version of it, I laid out the starter deck, and then I changed out all of the relevant cards that made sense for my vision of Menasor.
Yeah, so we turned it into a heavy blue deck, I think.
So anything that could be swapped card for card, we made that swap.
So ramming speeds, I think, became
a vaporize and a smelt.
Yeah.
Zaps became underhanded tactics.
So that was a new card that came out in Rise of the Combiners. So it's basically a blue zap.
But anything that was relevant in that version 1 build, we removed the orange and replaced it with anything that was the blue equivalent.
Yeah. And then I think did you take out the ready for actions?
Yes.
Because those are in the starter deck.
I took those out.
Replace those with, something else, something not blank. Because there are several blanks in the starter deck that didn't necessarily have to be there. So I built a different version of Menasor. I had a different thing in mind. So my deck ended up being a 50 card deck because I wanted something beefy. I just wanted to try it out. But it was very similar to yours in scope. I had just had some more cards in there to mess with people. I ran collateral damages, I remember, because I figured I was going to be drawing so many cards that I wanted to mess with the other person's hand and it wouldn't screw me up as much. Things of that nature. So at Origins, we had a lot of fun with Menasor, even though we didn't win, because nobody knew how to play against him, which was the best part. So we almost always won the first match because nobody knew who to attack, what anybody did,
or what we were going to play for cards.
Yeah, or what we were going to play for cards. Since Menasor was not a part of the meta going into Origins, just nobody knew what to do against him. So that first game was almost always a win for us because they didn't know who was the most dangerous, who they needed to attack.
If they were playing cards, it changed their whole mentality of, let me untap Cliffjumper and attack with him again, because they didn't want him taking that 1 damage every attack. So it forced them to flip into an alt mode and attack with someone different in order to manipulate their turn in a manner in which that they could avoid taking 1 damage if they could.
Yeah, because we essentially, knowing that, you leave Motormaster unchanged so that they can't do direct damage to anybody but Motormaster. You leave, if they're playing cars, you leave Off-Road. You don't change him for as long as possible to, do as much damage to those cars that are coming at you as possible. And then once you turn into Menasor, he's swinging for 6, which isn't a bad base attack. And then I think over the course of Origins, we sort of learned that the pierce damage that we were getting from specifically, I think, piercing blasters and the Scoundrels blasters, because I think we were both running those, was actually way more important than doing a lot of damage. Because I think we were running grenade launchers and leap into battles in that first version, or at the very least leap into battles. I think we were both running those. But we found that even with the leap into battles or some of those straight damage boosts, we just weren't doing enough damage. And so that was the real downfall in that first version. So I ended up going to Gen Con and I played Menasor again, an updated version. Between
2.5.
Yeah, between Origin and Gen Con, we did a lot of thinking and play testing. And we decided that, forget trying to pump up his attack quite so much, and focus on Pierce. So what we've got laid out here is sort of the skeleton that we based that deck around. So we've got surprise attacks, which are an action that give you Pierce 3. We've got piercing blasters, which is a weapon, gives you Pierce 3. We've got calculated strikes, gives you +2 attack, and gives you +2 pierce. And then we get the Scoundrels blasters, +2 attack, and if you're fighting an Autobot, you get +2. You get 2 pierce. Almost all the decks, all the high-level decks, are running Autobots of some form. There's not a whole lot of Decepticons out there. So Scoundrels blasters are just in the deck. If you can get a piercing blaster out and a surprise attack, you're piercing for 6, which is Menasor's base attack once you combine. If you can get a surprise attack in your early on, you're swinging for 4 pierce with drag strip in bot mode. That's not a bad attack. A lot of the other characters, Dead Ends, Off-Road, and Motormaster, are all 3 attack in their bot modes. So if you get a piercing blaster on them, you're piercing for 3. If you can get a calculated strike with a piercing blaster, now you're piercing for 4 or 5, depending on which mode the character's in. we found that doing that consistent amount of small pierce damage was actually much more effective than trying to turn these guys into big hitters.
Yeah, there was no need to swing for the fences. Guarantee doing 2 or 3 damage every turn really was able to whittle down your opponent. Building a heavy blue deck, if you could get 2 attacks with somebody, that was just as devastating as having, swung for 10 and able to get 4 or 5 damage through.
Yeah, because with your 2 small attacks, you're piercing for 6. Almost all, in all the various combinations of cards. So we found that was much better. Once you turn into Menasor, being able to play 2 actions a turn, if you can get down a calculated strike and a surprise attack, if you've already got the Noble's Blaster on, or if you're, we don't have it pictured here, but Laser Cutlass is useful at the beginning of the game. Energon Axes also useful, because it's giving you more attack and some pierce. It's just all about maximizing your pierce. The other thing we learned was that there can't be a whole lot of dead cards in your deck. The Menasor build has to be kind of a precisely built deck. You can't have a lot of stuff in there that isn't useful in both modes, combiner mode and as individuals.
Yeah, even though that you're running cars and trucks here, you might lean towards wanting to run a card that is geared toward cars or geared toward trucks. We found through our play testing that those cards are worthless in the Menasor deck. It just doesn't get you where you want to go, because once you form Menasor, those are just cards that are in your way. So when you're playing 2 actions and it's more of an action-heavy deck, those drawing 2 cards and being able to play 2 actions, it's great when you can pick up an Enigma and you formed Menasor. You're drawing 2 cards and you can still play another action. It's nice when you can play the right combination and you can live the dream and you can brainstorm before you form Menasor. That's probably the most devastating move that there is, because you're drawing 2 more cards. You brainstormed, you formed Menasor, and you've got a whole bunch of actions still awaiting you.
Yeah, so if you can manage to brainstorm Stunticon Enigma and then say a surprise attack or calculated strike, you turn into Menasor, you draw 2 more cards. Because you're now Menasor, you still got 1 more action to play. So if you drew into, or you have another surprise attack or calculated strike,
or if you drew another card draw,
set yourself up for next turn by drawing 2 more cards on top of the 2 that you just drew from turning into Menasor. There's just a lot of stuff going on with this deck.
Gen Con did reveal some flaws to our thought process. We did build with the thought process of armor being relevant, but bashing shields have definitely infiltrated full force into the meta, which we hadn't seen yet at Origins.
Yeah, people were playing them, but they weren't quite as prevalent as I saw them at Gen Con.
Every time
I played an armor, I almost always got bashing shielded, which stunk because it was like I wasted that turn. I'm already running a heavy blue deck. I've got a couple of reinforced platings. I was running those green and blue
covert armors,
extra paddings and covert armors. The covert armors were good for off-road and motor master, and then after you turn into Menasor, since he's melee, those worked. So I had a lot of armors, but every time I played one, I seemed to get discarded immediately. So it was rough, and I never, even with all the card draw, I never seemed to be able to get those 3 extra paddings in my hand to play all at once, to prevent a little bit of that from, because when you only play one of them and then it immediately gets bashing shielded, that's kind of a waste. Plus, I almost always, because I'm trying to do as much damage as possible, I almost always had a better play than to play the armors. They were almost getting in the way, because I wanted to play the surprise attack on drag strip to get my 4 pierce in. I wanted to play the piercing blaster to give somebody else pierce 3. I wanted to play the calculated strike. I wanted to play the scoundrel's blaster. If by some miracle somebody had taken some damage and survived, I wanted to play that Energon axe that I had. I wanted to play that laser cutlass to get that pierce damage. So I think in the next builds, there's going to be a little less armor, still a heavy blue deck, still heavy pierce, but we've talked about putting bigger they are's in the deck to give you more pierce at the beginning of the game, when the guys are little, because almost everybody is bigger than them. So that gives you, +2 attack and pierce 4 if the character is bigger than them. Even late game, that +2 attack is not bad. You're missing out on the pierce, but you've got other stuff to give you pierce at that point.
And because you can play 2 actions every turn, you're giving yourself +2 and an opportunity for another action. So if you've got a Scoundrels out there equipped to Menasor already, and you're giving it +2, well, now you're swinging for 10. You've got a potential for Pierce 3. And then if you're playing a surprise attack or a calculated strike, you're swinging for either that 10 or 12, and maybe a Pierce 5 or Pierce 6.
Yeah. So at Gen Con, I did manage to, I think I won most of my first matches, almost always. Again, because people hadn't seen Menasor, they didn't really know how to play against it until they had seen it play through once. So that first match, I almost always won. The one time I didn't win the first match, he drew into the only card that could have beat me at the time. My biggest problem was that I did play against, there were a couple of, what are they, like 3 wide primes? Is that
turns into double primes?
Yeah, the Optimus Prime, Battlefield Legend, and Nemesis Prime, and that was my biggest downfall, because these guys, even with the heavy build blue, just couldn't take those big swings that they were dealing out. So they were pretty much getting one-shotted, which is a problem for this deck, because if you really want everybody to get at least 2 attacks before they die. So definitely still some tweaking to do. Let's see, what else can we talk about? Yeah, so Stuntagon Swaggers. We don't run them in this version of Menasor, because it became, I don't know, they might go back in maybe as a sideboard, but
every card needs to have a purpose, and Stuntagon Swagger, it seems great, but definitely I'm a fan of getting Gyro Blasters into this deck so that you're only flipping 2 cards.
Yeah, because since we don't care, it's a blue deck, so we're not flipping extra damage. All the pierce that we're doing should be on the table, or we're playing an action to get it. So we're not relying on black pips really to get more pierce. We have a couple in the deck, but we're not relying on those. So only flipping 2 cards, not a huge
not a huge issue for us, but your opponent. A lot of people playing bold,
especially with Lionizer,
with only being able to flip 2 cards, regardless of if you flipped a white. Definitely can be devastating if played correctly.
Some other things just that I've noticed from my discussions online with other people about Menasor is One Shall Stand, One Shall Fall has no place in this deck. You can't afford to be doing damage to your own guys. I actually ran 1 Inferno Breath at Gen Con, and I wish I had run 3, because there were a lot of times where, if I couldn't get that Piercing Blaster or that Laser Cutlass or whatever onto my guys, it would have been worth it to just tap somebody down to deal 3 direct damage. Especially if they were trying to protect somebody and they didn't want me to attack that person. It would have been really nice to have that extra direct damage. But One Shall Stand, One Shall Fall is... You can't afford to be dealing 3 damage to your own guys. Same thing, once you turn into Menasor, he's only got 35 health, which isn't a ton. So doing damage to yourself is a really bad idea. Same thing with rapid conversions. I've seen a lot of people to try and get into your combiner mode quicker, but those rapid conversions become dead cards as soon as you become Menasor. They just get in your way because they're useless now. You can't do anything with them.
Yeah, it's got to be that tight build. It's got to be useful in both modes. I know we were talking about some of the matches that you had at Gen Con, and you even said that you were able to pull that Inferno Breath when you were Menasor, because you just happened to not have the right card, or they were holding back somebody to protect them, and the Inferno Breath allowed you to do the 3 damage to take out their character, because you knew you could withstand the attack from who was left.
Yeah. So, that was kind of funny. Honestly, using Inferno Breath to tap Menasor to do 3 damage to somebody is kind of a ridiculous thing, but I did it a couple of times, and it was super useful. Another thing to think about is, you, at the beginning of the game, you really have to decide who can take what damage based on who you're playing against, or who you're going to deal damage to. With the advent of the Battle Masters, I don't know, the way I saw people playing them, a lot of people were trying to take out those Battle Masters as quickly as possible, so that they could turn them into the weapons, and then you could, get rid of them with some other card. I went the opposite way, and if somebody attacked me with a Battle Master, I would throw Off-Road at them and do 0 damage to the Battle Master. I don't care. I don't want to kill your Battle Master. Why should I help you? If you want that guy dead, you do it. I'm not going to help. I'm not going to waste my attacks on a guy that maybe 2 turns from now you're going to piece through Tyranny anyway. And I've wasted all that damage that I could have put on somebody else. So yeah, I would attack Battle Masters with somebody that wouldn't do any damage, because it was going to be a wasted attack. So I might as well waste it on the Battle Master and save all my Pierce for their bigger characters. If I could, do 0 damage to Flame War, and then manage to do, 6 Pierce with Drag Strip, by playing a Piercing Blaster on him and then playing a Calculated Strike on Optimus Prime. I was living the dream right there. I just did 6 damage to Optimus Prime. Pierce, so it doesn't matter if they're playing a blue shell or not. That's nearly half his health. Just gone. A couple more 3 pierces, and Optimus Prime is out of the game. So, yeah, the beginning of the game, if you can mitigate who they're attacking and make them quote-unquote waste their attacks on your guys that you don't care about.
Which is all of them.
Yeah, you can't be super precious with these guys. At the beginning of the game, you almost always want to attack with Breakdown. Breakdown first. Because he's got no special ability in his alt mode. So you don't care about flipping him, except to turn into Menasor. So we're running a heavy, a blue shell. So if you can get that 4 attack on the first turn against somebody with 0 or 1 defense, great.
Great against those orange decks.
Yeah.
Insecticons, where the damage is getting through.
Mm-hmm. Dead End, you want to flip him to draw a card, and that's pretty much it. You don't care about him once you've drawn that extra card. Because you're not going to be flipping him back to then flip him again to draw another card. That's just... You're slowing down your change into Menasor. Same with Drag Strip. You flip him into bot mode when it's useful. And then you swing for as much Pierce as you can muster. The dream is to have a Piercing Blaster and then a Calculated Strike for 6 Pierce on somebody with Drag Strip. But yeah, so I think there are definitely still decks out there that are good, are solid, can be competitive. It's just finding out how to crack it. Finding the right way to approach the deck so that it can be competitive.
Don't let somebody tell you that something can't work. Everyone told us that Menasor couldn't work, and we are determined that Menasor can work and will work. And in that first match, it proved itself time and time again. Game 1, a straight build is not going to take down Menasor. It required them to sideboard in order to manipulate their deck to have a chance against Menasor. So the ball's in our court again to find the next variation to compete with the new data we've uncovered. But until you put it out there and play against more variations of different builds and different decks, it's hard to say what will and won't work.
Yeah. So at Gen Con, I played Menasor straight up. No sideboard and no additional character. I just played the deck straight because it's a pretty solid build. The only trouble I had was against the 2Y primes. I couldn't do anything against that. So we do have some ideas for how to change the deck a little to compete with that sort of a build. We even have a couple of ideas for possible sideboards, but we haven't tried them yet, so we won't talk about them now in this video. But yeah, so
maybe you'll see Menasor at the Energon Invitational.
Yeah, I'm still gonna try and get my store qualifier so that I can play in December with Menasor. I'm determined to play Menasor. So, get out there, try to, build those weird decks, because even those top level players didn't know how to play against Menasor. They didn't know what was in the deck. They didn't know who to attack, who not to attack. even if they did, if you threw you're 5 wide, so you can afford to throw somebody to the wolves, as it were. Because if you know what they're gonna do on their turn, if they've only got one big attacker left, you can throw somebody out there to screw with their plans. It's fantastic. But anyway, if you guys have any ideas or suggestions for things that we could do to this deck, leave it in the comments. If you guys have ideas for, sideboards or things of that nature, give us a shout out. Anyway, this has been Menasor. So go out there, try your own build. But do remember, no dead cards. If that's the one thing we can
emphasize
say,
the most.
Yeah,
is that
they need to be useful in both modes. You can't
pre and post combining.
Yeah.
They've got to stay relevant.
So, one last thing on that note, marksmanship. I saw a lot of people playing marksmanship. Doesn't work against combiners. Only works against bot mode. I don't know how many people tried to use that against me, and I was like, nope, I'm Menasor now. He's in combiner mode. Can't marksmanship me anymore. So, yeah, you gotta really pay attention to the specificity of some of those cards. But anyway, this has been Menasor, and we'll see you next time.
All right, thank you everyone for watching and hearing. Let us know what you think in the comments, and yes, thank you for watching. I think I said it like 3 times.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for watching.
Have you watched this?
How long?